Hi there and welcome. This video is brought to you by Open Door Church Sunbury. My name is Bruce. This week it's about boots. Yeah, we'll come back to those shortly. This is part 2 in a series, Staying Safe in the Struggles, from Ephesians chapter 6, Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus. And last week we saw that the biggest struggles, the most significant struggles of our life are often not the physical ones, but the spiritual ones. Paul talks about spiritual forces in the heavenly realm, the struggles against things like accusation and guilt, fear, doubt, anxiety, temptation, all those kind of things that can oppress us and drag us down. Last week we saw that we had a first line of defense that started with one of these. Paul is using the analogy of a first century soldier, and he talks about the belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness. And that truth and righteousness in our lives are a protection and a shield against accusation and guilt. Bad attitudes and bad behavior are the enemy within. You can't fight evil if you're already compromised by it, if you've done a deal and admitted it into your life in some shape and form. So actual truth and righteousness are really important in those spiritual battles. But then there's a second line of defense involving things that are maybe a bit less tangible, and we're going to start on those this week. And the first we find in Ephesians 6 and verse 15. And Paul said, "Stand firm then." And he says, "with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests." So he uses here some imagery that seems to come from the poetry of Isaiah 52, verse 7. "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation." One of the things, if you're a soldier on standby, if you're at readiness, maybe expecting an attack or expecting to go on the attack, one of the crucial and most important things is you need to keep your boots on. Because you can, if the attack comes, you can quickly slip your helmet on, you can pick up your weapon, but you do not want to be found desperately struggling to tie your laces when the bullets or the arrows start flying. Keep your boots on. It's good advice to the soldier on readiness. And the gospel, Paul says, is our source of readiness for the fight. It's the reason we fight. It's why we oppose evil in our lives, in the lives of others. It is the very enemy of the things that want to ensnare and trap and destroy us. It's the foundation of our faith. It's the truth we stand in when we stand. If we're rooted and grounded in the gospel, the grace of God, the promise of his salvation through Jesus Christ, we'll be ready if the ground we stand on comes under attack. It's the thing that unifies us as we stand and fight together. It's the thing that brings peace among us and between us. Back in chapter 2 of the same letter, if you've been following this series all the way through, you may remember we read that he himself, that's Jesus, is our peace, who made the two groups, that was Jew and Gentile, one, and destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. He came and preached peace to you who were far away, and peace to those who are near. So it's a gospel of peace. It's what will bring peace. That's what Isaiah said, gospel of peace. It will bring peace through the defeat of the very spiritual powers that oppose us. And in a few weeks' time, when Christmas comes, we're probably going to hear other words from Isaiah read at some point of the increase of his government and of peace. There will be no end. The gospel of peace is the ground in which it's the thing in which we stand. It's the ground upon which we stand. And then Paul says, take up the shield of faith. Now, there are many different kinds of shields that the first century soldier might carry, depending whether they were mounted, whether they were light infantry, designed for hit and run attacks, or whether they were heavy infantry, designed to go in or stand against an attack, or go in, with both feet and heavy boots. But all of them were designed as something that you could crouch behind or you could carry, and something that would take the force of that first attack, normally the artillery, and Paul says they're for protection against the flaming arrows of the evil one. The Greek word belos means any projectile that's used as a weapon, so bolts and arrows, spears, javelins, or rocks, or anything flung from a catapult, anything like that. And sometimes those things would be coated or tipped in tar, which was then set fire to before the projectile was launched. And the shield of the soldier was capable of deflecting those. Matthew Henry identifies flaming arrows as temptation, but Paul isn't specific. An incendiary device is intended to start a fire wherever it ends up. And so if your shield just deflects it, it lands somewhere else, and it might start a fire and cause issues behind your lines or within your own lines. John Calvin said that faith will be found capable not only of blunting their edge, but of quenching their heat. So temptation, doubt, fear, regret, guilt, and accusation, through faith we can absorb and neutralize all of those things as they come against us, and all of the attacks and weapons that Satan tries to throw to discourage us or to neutralize us in our walk with God. Isaiah 54:17 says, no weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. And that is one of the roles of faith, is in deflecting and absorbing and neutralizing the attacks of the enemy against us, spiritual attacks. But it's the boots are something that you had to put on. The shield was something you had to take up. It was part of the armor. It was a gift to you, but there was a participation. The next two items are things that are very much gifts, things that God gives to us, and Paul says we need to take, or literally receive, he says. And the first is the helmet of salvation. There is nothing for us to do. We simply have to receive salvation. It is a gift of God. We do not, whereas in terms of personal truth and righteousness, we have decisions to make. There is attitude to change. There is behavior to adjust. But when it comes to salvation, it's wholly a gift of God that we receive. John Wesley wrote, the head is that part which is most carefully to be defended. One stroke here may prove fatal. The armour for this is the hope of salvation. The lowest degree of hope is a confidence that God will work the whole work of faith in us. The highest is a full assurance of future glory, added to the experimental knowledge of pardoning love. Experimental knowledge of pardoning love in our lives, knowing our salvation, having confidence in the forgiveness of God based on the sacrifice of Jesus. It's not just about future glory though, but it extends to the things we face in life. And that's why we need it, not just on our dying day, but every day. I've not personally yet seen God save me from death, but I have experienced and seen, or know others who've experienced and seen God rescue from many other things, from debt, addiction, incurable cancer, paralyzing fear. Whatever attack comes against us, God is able to save us. God can save broken people. God can save broken relationships. And that is the salvation that we put on and is God's gift to us. if we receive it. So, truth and righteousness, the readiness to stand and fight, grounded in the gospel of Jesus, faith, salvation, those are our defences. May God help us daily when we wake up to remember and to put on and to build our lives on his gospel, his salvation, and the faith that we have that he gives us. Next week, the job of the soldier is not simply to defend, but to attack. And next week, we look at the weapons that God has given us to take the attack to the enemy and to actually not just defend his attacks against us, but actually be a positive influence in life and in society. So I hope you'll join me for that next week. And in the meantime, may God bless you and continue to work in your lives.